Hello and welcome to another Tune for Media lesson. I am very excited because this is my first Max lesson. We're going to do a series about synthesizing, and I felt like Max will probably the best software to show you in depth some of the techniques here. So if you're not familiar with Max, Max is a software that runs some kind of a visual programming language called Max. And it lets you do basically whatever you want with sound and also in video and a bunch of other stuff. So we're going to use Max, and this is sort of like a combination of learning the basics, the physics, the acoustics of synthesizing a kick drum, but also it's some kind of a tutorial for Max. So if you're interested in learning Max, I feel like this can be a great tutorial. And if you're Max users or Max for Live users, you can click the link below and download this patch or this module and use it for your own creation. If you're using Max for Live, you may need to adjust some of the things to make it work properly, but pretty easy. It's kind of a like copy and paste thing here. Okay, so let's begin. One of the biggest reasons I chose Max is that we're not just going to synthesize a kick drum, we're going to build the actual module that makes it work. So I think it's probably one of the best ways to really get deep into how to synthesize a kick drum or how to synthesize in general. I'm going to just copy that. This is for my trigger, is just receiving notes from my keyboard here. And we're going to open a new patch. So what do we need for a kick drum to have? How does a kick drum work? These are the questions we need to ask in order to approach it. And there's actually tons of different approaches to synthesize a kick drum. And I'm going to show you my way. And it's kind of achieving this classic analog style drum. So in order to properly synthesize a kick drum, we need to understand the physics or the acoustics of a kick drum. So if you think about an acoustic kick drum or bass drum, we basically have this very, very loud and fast burst of energy in a pretty low frequency, and it just gets lower really, really fast, basically decays. So we're going to start with just a simple sine wave. So in Max, it's called a cycle. Let's just make it 60 hertz for now. Okay, so now we have a sine wave. So if I put up a scope, there you go, I should get this kind of sine wave. So let's do something like that. There you go. Okay, so now that we have a sine wave, let's go ahead and create some kind of an envelope that will take the pitch, start from the highest pitch, and drop down really, really fast, like we said. And so let's just do that. So in order to do that, I can use an object called function. And I can tell it also in mode to be the type of curve. So I can actually draw a function. Starts in the highest, which is 1. And in the X scale, I want to do something like that. Something like that. So this is pretty basic. This is just 1 dropping down really fast in this kind of shape to 0 in the X scale. So the Y is starting from 1, going down to 0, and it happens in 1,000 milliseconds or a second. Or I think I don't really know if the time domain in this function is in milliseconds, but anyways, works for me, and I can send it to a curve object. So all these numbers will go through this one, and I can basically multiply it by some number. So it doesn't really matter. Let's start by 60. So it will control the hertz here. So I don't need this anymore. And let's multiply it. And I can use this number box to determine what kind of frequency I want to start with. And I need something to excite this curve or this function. So this is why I copy and paste my trigger here. So let's send a trigger, and we'll call it kick. So this will send every time I press my lower C in my keyboard, it will send this trigger or this bang. Now I have something like that. Kind of weird, right? Because I do have a change in frequency, but it's kind of a stay in rather 1 or -1, So I need another kind of envelope, and the other one will be the amp envelope. So let's copy and paste this one. And amp is pretty easy because all I have to do in order to take this function, all I have to do is to just multiply this function, this curve, with this cycle. So I'm just going to add this multiply function, multiply object, sorry. And now, where's my scope? There you go. And now I'm going to have something like this. Okay, looks better now. Starting to look like a kick drum. And let's listen to the sound of it. And let's add the gain, so I won't blow your ears. And 1, 2. Okay. So I have a few controls here now. I can control how long is my pitch drop. Can control how long is the decay. And I can control how much pitch drop I want. And of course, I can also add to the curve another point and change the attack. So believe it or not, but that's actually the basics of kick drum synthesis. So it's basically taking a sine wave, or you can take even a saw or a pulse or whatever, any cycle that you'll take and create some kind of a very fast drop in pitch into the lower pitches. And the entire thing is pretty low. It was starting in, topmost like 200 hertz. Anything like that will create the sound of a kick drum somehow. It will be different, and this is where you choose different flavors. For example, I like to add this very easy filter. This is called one pole. It's the simplest low pass filter, and you can actually make one of these in Max. It's so easy, but we're gonna use it like that. And say like 500. It's going to kind of take off a little bit of this clickiness that we have. Now we have a different problem. And if you're doing this synthesis on a built-in synthesizer plugin, or a device in Ableton Live or whatever, you probably won't have this problem because the oscillators can be re-triggered pretty easily. But now we have a problem, and it's kind of inconsistency. see that some kicks are clickier than other, if it makes sense. And this is because the sine wave or the cycle here is always keep running, and every time we excite these functions, we basically adding some numbers to the multiplication here. So it keeps running. So I can catch it in the middle of a phase. I can catch it in the peak of the phase. I can catch it in different places, and I can control it like that. So in Max, we can do something else. Instead of sending this, we can use another object called a phaser. Let's say it's a 60. And now I'm going to send my frequencies change to here. Oh, I don't know why I got rid of this one. Okay. And I should also send something like that. So I want to trigger the phase of this phaser. Every time I press the trigger, I want it to bring it back to 0. And I can change it, and playing with it will change my sound. So if I want my kick drum to be a lot more clicky, I can actually work with that. And then I can send this one to here. Now I will have a much more consistent kick drum. Awesome. Okay. So here's another thing that I like to do. I like to take noise, and if you're familiar with FM synthesis, FM synthesis basically is the multiplication of different signals to create another maybe more complex signal. So I can take this signal and I will multiply. Oh, you know what? Let's add a gain first, because noise is kind of crazy. So what noise is basically just random amplitude of any frequency band. So sometimes called white noise, and I think it's because this from the color spectrum, when you say like all of the colors are white, so noise is like kind of all of the frequencies all together, randomly just jumping on and off. So I can multiply them together, and I'm gonna get some kind of a weird sound. And I also want my noise to be faster than anything else. So I'm going to send a line object, and I'm going to tell it to go from 1, which is like full amplitude, to 0 in like, let's say 10 milliseconds. And this is exactly as this curve. It's basically just a smaller version of this function plus curve, or I can use line here also, and then I won't have this kind of a slope, but it's exactly the same, just smaller and easier. And I can multiply it together. It's kind of a little envelope. And let's send the trigger to this line. This noise is like riding always. And every time I hit this button, I'm basically sending the line function here, and it will be sent to here. So I have something like that. Okay. So now, let's get rid of this. So now this multiplication is not enough for our kick. We're going to use FM and kind of additive synthesis here. So we're going to add the two signals together. So the multiplied signal and the original signal without noise. And we can add them to this volume gain fader. Let's see what we have from here. So that's it. I hope you learned something from this video. It's my first lesson in Max, and I hope you learned some things from here. And if you're trying to improve your Max skills, I hope this tutorial helped you understand some new things. And if you're not using Max, I hope you learned some things about the physics of kick drum synthesis. And if you're using Max or Max for Live, go ahead and click the link below. You can download my module for free, and you can use it to any of your projects. And see you next time. Stay tuned.